Welcome to the series Mud Talks, Consumer Electronics and the Circular Economy with Julia L.F. Goldstein, class of 88, P18. My name is Vanessa Chu, Assistant Director in the Office of Alumni and Parent Relations. We thank you for attending today's event, and we hope you and your family are safe and healthy during this time. This talk is being recorded and will be distributed after the event. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat, and we will try to get through as many questions as we can. Now, to briefly introduce our speaker, Julia Goldstein graduated from MUD with an engineering degree, and she went on to earn a Master of Science from Stanford and a PhD from UC Berkeley, both in materials science. She started her career as a process development engineer in semiconductor packaging before migrating to journalism in 2001. As the owner of JLFG Communications, she writes white papers, articles, and other technical marketing content for manufacturing companies, including many in the electronics industry, and she is the award-winner author of 2 books, Material Value, More Sustainable, Less Wasteful, Manufacturing of Everything from Cell Phones to Cleaning Products, and Rethink the Bins, Your Guide to Smart Recycling and Less Household Waste. Now, I'm going to turn it over to you, our speaker. Julia, take it away. Julia, you're still on mute.
Thank you, Vanessa. Everybody, hopefully you can see my presentation. If you're wondering what is the circular economy and what does it have to do with my smartphone, don't worry, I'll explain it. And if you already know a lot about this topic, I have a feeling you'll still learn something new. In the electronics industry and semiconductor manufacturing, there's long been a mantra of smaller, faster, and cheaper. How many transistors can we pack into a tiny silicon chip? How can we make everything go faster with more apps and more functionality in a smaller space and make it cheaper so that millions of people can buy it? And that's been the driving force. What I want to say is we can say, and we can make it cleaner and greener. Here I've got an outline of the things I'm going to cover, talking about why should you care? In short, it's about climate change. It's about greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a bunch of different sources, and this graph is data from 2017, but it hasn't changed that much since. Yes, we need to address problems of transportation. Yes, we need to create energy in a more renewable manner, right? More solar, more wind, the electricity that's powering everything from our homes, our electronics, our vehicles. But this section here that says industry, that includes electronics. And there's a lot of emissions there. And so making the electronics cleaner and greener is going to make a difference. Vanessa already introduced me and gave an idea of why I'm here talking about this topic. Just being an author of 2 books that are related to it gives me a certain amount of authority. I'm a materials geek. Ever since I took Intro to Materials with Professor Joe King at Harvey Mudd my junior year and decided I was so fascinated about materials. And in recent years, I've really just become more concerned about the environmental and social impact of all those fascinating materials. And yes, I've got background in the semiconductor industry from both working as an engineer back in the 90s and 20 years of experience writing about these topics. So I want to start, well, not start, but at this point, I want to give you some definitions so you know what we're talking about. Before I do that, I'm going to start a poll. I want an idea of, just a minute, which terms you're already familiar with. You should now be able to see a poll and just vote yes or no. Do you know about the circular economy, triple bottom line, greenwashing, conflict minerals? Just let me know if you know about these things. And once we get the votes in, I can share the results. And I will explain all these different topics to people who maybe are not familiar with them. So I'll just give it a little bit longer for everybody to weigh in and answer these questions. See, we got about 85% of the people. If there's anything in chat that says anyone's having a hard time with it, I don't see anything like that. So it looks like we're about ready. And now I can share the results. So now you should be able to see the results. And it's kind of split. I will explain all these different things. And I see a lot of you are familiar with the idea of conflict minerals, but not so much with the triple bottom line. Yeah, when I put something on my LinkedIn profile that said I work with triple bottom line companies, somebody said, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you. The circular economy. Our general economy that we've had for decades, well, centuries, is a linear economy. We extract materials from the earth, we use them to make stuff, and then we throw it away. But part of the problem is there is really no away. All those places on the earth, right? Whether we're throwing it in the trash can, whether it's getting shipped off to China and figure they're going to deal with it, people live there. We're contaminating our cities, our soils, our water through this linear economy way of doing things. And the circular economy is a way to change that, because we're not going to go back to a place where we don't have any electronics and we don't live in buildings and we don't drive cars and we don't have streets. That's not going to happen. But instead, we can be smarter about how we do these things with the idea of the circular economy. We start with materials, we make things, and then we put them back into the system. We recycle them. Now, I know this cute little recycling symbol doesn't mean that that's the solution to everything. So it's really more complicated than this, but I like this nice little diagram that my illustrator made for me from one of my books. So there are two different cycles, right? There's an organic cycle, and that's more like how nature does things. Just the natural cycle of things that live and die and then regenerate the soil. When we use composting, we're making use of an organic cycle where we take branches, leaves, food waste, and compost them to make soil that will then grow more crops. The technical cycle is for things like metals and plastics, engineered materials that are not coming from nature. What we can do is keep those things in a technical cycle and reuse the materials and then limit our need to extract more. And if you want to learn more about the circular economy, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a great resource. And you don't need to write this down right now. I'll be sharing later a resource guide, and it includes a list. It includes a link to that website. Now, the triple bottom line. The bottom line means companies that are looking at profit. They're looking at how much money are we going to make this quarter? What's our profit loss statement? That kind of thing. The idea of the triple bottom line is that there are three prongs: people, planet, and profit. They all need to be in balance to be a healthy, responsible business. Now, the electronics industry has not historically embraced this concept, but it's starting to. More and more companies are saying, we care about our impact on the planet. We care about people. Our customers, our employees, our communities, we care about public health, and we care about these environmental things. And the more this takes hold, the more companies who don't do this and don't care about the triple bottom line are going to get left behind. Greenwashing. This is using lots of nice pictures and pretty words to tell a lovely story that says, oh, look, we're being so green. We printed this on recycled paper, or just some little thing, and look, we're giving back to the community and we're planting trees. But behind the scenes, they're still polluting the lakes and rivers, creating oodles of waste, using way too much resources, and not really doing the right thing. So the trick with marketing is to avoid going into greenwashing and to tell the whole honest story. And it's a really difficult challenge to encourage companies to do that. I want to talk briefly here about the difference between recyclable and recycled, because a lot of materials are technically recyclable, meaning they can be ground up, melted, and made into new materials and used. But a lot of them do not get recycled. People like to quote the statistic about 9% of plastics get recycled. That is old data. And more recent data from the Plastic Pollution Coalition says, unfortunately, the number's even dropping. So I say there's sort of three aspects. The science is, can the material technically be recycled? The technology, are there systems and equipment in place to collect the material, sort it, and process it? And then economics, which is the big one. Is there a market to buy the recycled material? Is it going to cost 3 times as much as virgin material? And if it is, there's not as much of an incentive. But I believe we need to change the system so there's more incentive to really recycle the material. And of course, recognizing that using less in the first place is really the better answer. And I know a lot of you said you're familiar with the idea of conflict minerals. Metals come from ores that are extracted from the earth in mining. And a lot of this mining is happening in parts of the world, in war-torn countries. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is one such place. And when I have shown this slide in-person presentations, I ask people, okay, can you point out where is the Democratic Republic of the Congo? If anyone wants to chime in on chat and tell me, what colored shape where on the map there you think it is, go ahead and do that. And I will tell you in a moment where it actually is. Conflict minerals, typically there's the three TG: tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold. Gold is especially an issue because it's such a high economic value that there's a lot of incentive for people to do some very unfair practices that are very dangerous and harming people. Yeah, we talk about child and slave labor. There's just a lot of bad stuff going on there. I made a comment here, artisanal mines. So artisanal, we usually think of that as something positive, like artisanal cheese or bread or wine. It's from these small businesses that are making homemade stuff that's fabulous. No, these small mines are what are flying under the radar and not getting noticed. And some of these horrible practices are still continuing. Many of the companies in the supply chain who are getting these metals have a hard time really telling whether the metals they're getting are actually conflict-free. I've got some in the middle somewhere, olive. Yeah. Okay, this is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Can you see with my cursor there? So hopefully you can see with my cursor. Yeah. So there it is. That's the issue there. Now we want to take a look at what is in your phone. So there's a lot of different things in your phone. Plastics, metals. This data here about 130 million cell phones. That's the number of cell phones that were discarded worldwide in 2009. So I don't know the data from this year, but it's going to be even worse. Well, I don't know. Today, everybody's been just kind of holding on to their stuff maybe, but this is just an idea of the different kinds of materials that are in there. And this lists copper, silver, and gold. there are about 20 different metals inside your cell phone. And here's an image that I got from a client I was working with, this elements of a smartphone diagram. So there's a lot of the periodic table in there. And some of it is in very tiny, tiny quantities, but it's necessary for these circuits to work. Now, I do want to point out something that's a little bit outdated here. It has tin and lead for the solder. Today's cell phones do not, and laptops and whatnot, don't have tin lead solder in them. They have a lead-free solder that's made from tin, silver, and copper, these so-called SAC alloys. But just because they don't have lead doesn't mean that all the problems have gone away. Mining is an energy-intensive activity. And so there's an energy cost to extracting metals and processing them and processing the ores and making them into metals that can then be used in things. So I said, yeah, aluminum is the most highly recycled. I noted the 2-3% recycling rate for plastics. For aluminum, it's somewhere between 70 and 75%. Now, it could still be higher. And the thing with metals is you can recycle them over and over and over again, and they don't lose quality. We need to recycle metals more. So in a moment, I will show you a chart that will explain to you why gold is so expensive, and silicon is pretty darn expensive too, right? That's what all those chips are made on. So this data, and the MUD audience will understand it, but I'm just going to point out, this is a log scale. This is not linear, right? So this is 10 times more than that. So if you take a look at gold, it's way up here at 53,000 gigajoules per ton. The other thing, and here's silicon at 20,000. Another thing I want to point out, I've got aluminum here and then recycled aluminum. So if you take aluminum and you are mining bauxite and then processing it, which that is actually a very toxic process, uses a lot of caustic chemicals, and it's very environmentally damaging. Instead, if you use recycled aluminum, we've cut that incredibly down. It's a lot less energy. So we really want to be able to recycle more of these metals. Again, here's again a lot of what is wrong with mining. It's dangerous to people, the planet. The idea with, if we can implement more of this circular economy, we can do less mining. This is actually possible. It's just we've got a long history of mining and industries that want to keep doing it. And they want to say, okay, we are mining in a responsible manner. We're a responsible mining company. And that's where it's hard. You might have to look more closely to see where is the greenwashing behind that. Are they actually being responsible? Are they really being a triple bottom line company? Or are they just, well, we're better than those other mining companies that are employing slave labor? The way that you can take care of this is through something called urban mining, which means you collect the electronics. This is part of e-waste collection. You collect the electronics and extract the metals from them. And I noted the most valuable is gold. I did a calculation. So there's only about 0.03 grams of gold in one phone. These are in the contacts on the circuit boards. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. And part of why gold has such a high energy cost is because the ore that you're mining has such a tiny, tiny amount of gold in it. They have to mine between 2 and 90 tons of gold ore. That depends on the site and how rich it is in gold to extract 1 ounce of gold. And that's the amount in around 1,000 cell phones. There's an economic incentive, and there's an environmental and health incentive to get this gold from phones instead of mining more from the earth. E-waste can also extract 20 other metals. There's a lot of different methods being put in place that can extract more resources from those phones more efficiently. And so again, this is an example of a circular model. Instead of the linear, take it, make a phone, or I just use a phone as an example. It's also a laptop. It's any kind of electronics. And then throw it away. I mean, these things are ending up in landfills. My guess is everyone in this audience here knows that you don't throw your old electronics into a landfill. At least I hope so. But here, if you have a circular situation, when it's taken to an e-waste processor, collected, one option is it can go back to a secondary market. There are countries where they don't feel like everybody has to have the latest and greatest iPhone. They're happy to take one that's a few years old and still works well. And so you can sell those back into a secondary market and more people can use them. Eventually, though, they're not going to be usable for that. Then again, recover the metals and plastics and glass, put it back into the system. So that's what we're really trying to work towards. But e-waste recycling rates are dismal. They're around 20%. But there are signs of progress. So all is not lost. I say the needle is moving. I wrote in 2019, ideally, electronics manufacturers will become vocal advocates of the circular economy. I'll say we're not totally there yet, but there's signs of progress. So I look at Apple, for example. They made a really audacious claim saying, our goal is to use no mined metals in our products. Now, they didn't put an actual timeline on that goal, right? They didn't say, oh, we're doing it by 2030 or something like that, because my guess is they probably didn't know how long it would take. But they are making that commitment public, and they've made progress. There's a lot of metals that Apple is using recycled. This is sort of the Apple periodic table here, and all the elements in blue are ones that Apple is working on trying to source recycled. And they already source a lot of recycled aluminum. That's more for the cases, right? For a laptop case. They're also sourcing some of these are some of the rare earths that go inside the circuit boards, and they are sourcing those. Now, those are not coming from old iPhones. Those are coming from an industrial partner. So there are also opportunities in manufacturing where there's scrap that then can go to a different industry and be used for something else. I find it encouraging that Apple is working on this. So much so that when it came time for me to buy a new phone, I actually was really seriously considering an Apple phone, even though I'd always gone with Android. Now, I have another poll that I wanted to ask you all about, which is, how long have you owned your current smartphone? So just think about it. And I did include an option to realize that maybe not everybody has one. I mean, we can't assume that everybody has a smartphone, but in general, people do. So let's see how this comes up here. And until recently, I had my Samsung phone from 2015. They stopped supporting it in 2018. In 2020, I still had it, and it was really not working very well. I went out on this 10-mile hike and it completely stopped working. I thought, well, to some degree, there's a little bit of a safety thing in having a phone with you. I mean, years ago, people didn't have them and then they went off in the wilderness. But nowadays, it just seems like I don't want a phone that's just not even going to be able to do anything. It kept malfunctioning. It wouldn't hold a charge. I finally said, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet and get another phone. And I thought about Apple because of some of the things that they'd been doing. But I went to the T-Mobile store and they had a deal on the Samsung ones, and also realizing that the way I had it set up, I'd been using all the Android stuff all along and I didn't have any other Apple devices at home. It just didn't make sense for me. All right, let's see. How are we going? Let's share this results. Oh, we've got, okay, these are pretty dang evenly split. All right. So we've definitely got some people who've been holding on to their electronics for a while, which is great. You don't have to hold on to them forever. But the idea of, oh, every single time they come up with a new one because it's got a better camera, it's got new this, it's got new that. They've been doing this, trying to get everybody to keep buying new stuff all the time. And that's one of my soapboxes, trying to say this is, there we go. I can stop that share. Apple's not the only company that's made progress. Here's another example, which is HP. And there's lots of other companies that I could talk about. And there's ones that are doing a horrible job that I won't mention. But HP has been really good with making use of recycled materials in their inkjet and toner cartridges. So those are made almost entirely of recycled materials. They take back they have a great take back program. They take them back, they disassemble them, and they make them into new. They also have a program where they have people in Haiti and I think some other countries that are collecting plastic water bottles. Now that's something I think we could all totally do away with, but that's a separate topic. And HP has collected millions of those and also uses those in making their cartridges. But part of that is a clean waste stream, meaning all of it is plastic water bottles that are all the same material. They can melt them all down together. It's not a mix of all these different plastics, which is part of what's a big challenging thing for the recycling program. But again, HP is doing some good things. With printers, you've also got paper involved. So FSC certified paper is a really good option. So that's addressing stuff like deforestation, which is a big problem. So when you think about electronics, you think more about metals and plastics, but there's also paper, not just used in printers, but well, at the companies and in packaging their products. So that was another thing that HP did where, oh, they could avoid having this extra card that had to be wrapped in plastic that had the instructions on how to use the printer, and instead print the directions on the inside of the cardboard box. And they've done some packaging of their printers that have zero plastic that comes with the packaging. So, not throwing away that kind of stuff. So I had an opportunity recently to be part of a committee deciding on a sustainability award. It was an interesting thing reading through all these sustainability reports and trying to figure out, okay, which companies are doing better. There's not one completely uniform way that they're all reporting on this, on their emissions and their water use and all that kind of stuff. But we did an evaluation and said, okay, there are companies that are making progress. And we gave the award to ASE Group. If you're not in the industry, you might not have heard of them, but they are involved in the supply chain for many of these different electronics. And they've made some real progress. It's both in setting goals for reducing emissions, reducing use of hazardous materials, all that, and achieving those goals, and then setting more stringent goals for 2025, for 2030, setting these concrete goals. So I think it's encouraging that there's some signs of progress here. But here's what we can do. It seems like people are already kind of on board with the idea of keep your devices as long as possible. Also, buy secondhand. Or if you feel that you want the latest, greatest device, then donate it somewhere when you're done with it. Also, make sure to take your stuff for e-waste recycling. There's there's different certifications that you can kind of look up and see, okay, is the e-waste recycler actually being responsible? Because there was a whole story about a recycler in Washington and Oregon that wasn't doing that. They said they were being responsible, but really they were shipping their stuff off to countries where children were dismantling these devices and burning them in huge piles and not doing it on site. So you want a e-waste recycler that is doing their processing locally and making sure that they're being responsible about it. Now, I've got here a link for a resource guide, and this guide is part of my book, Rethink the Bins, which is primarily aimed at household waste. There are a dozen different categories that I cover. One of them is e-waste, and the resource guide includes a list of places where you can donate old phones. And then there's a whole bunch of different things. That also includes information about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and a list of a whole bunch of different books. So if you go there, we can type that link into the chat if people want to find that. So now I will open it up for questions. I'll keep this. This is how you can contact me. Feel free to also reach out later. Send me an email through the Harvey Mudd Alumni Association. You've also got my personal Gmail, but this is my business email. You can send to either one. I just don't publicize the personal one places. But yep, that's how you can reach me. I can share some of this stuff in the chat, and Vanessa, you can start us off with some questions.
Great. Do we have any questions from the audience currently? Give you a quick minute or two to type something in the Q&A. Well, Julia, I do have a few questions for you from our pre-submitted. And
I typed in the wrong URL there. So don't use that one. That's not going to work. I have two different websites, and that is not on, that's on my other website. So let me put that right so people don't go in. It'll say, no such page. This one should work. Okay.
Great, thank you. So how do we handle planned obsolescence and anti-repairability designs policies as important part of companies' yearly profit targets in convincing them to contribute to a sustainable economy?
Yes, the planned obsolescence has been a thing since way before I was born. There's a story, it started with the auto industry in the 1920s. Oh, let's bring out a new model every year. Part of what we can do is refuse to buy into that in saying, okay, we are not going to jump on it and just buy every latest, greatest thing that you put out. You can also look to, what companies you're supporting, or choose to buy used, give away, old things via various different places. It's a long entrenched system. Businesses will change when it's in their best economic interest to do so, which sounds a little bit like a cynical kind of approach. There are definitely people within those businesses and working in those industries who care very much about those issues. And to some degree, there's kind of this cognitive dissonance. They say, well, no, I want to be environmentally sound. I don't want to dump chemicals into the river, but my company is doing this. How do I try to make changes at my company? Maybe you can. Or you can work for a company that's not doing that. There's also opportunities to advocate for legislation that is going to encourage safer practices. And a lot of that is not necessarily around the planned obsolescence so much. They're not going to legislate that. That's more around avoiding hazardous waste problems, which is obviously also good, and convincing companies to emit less pollution, use less energy. And if there are absolute targets that they have to meet, because sometimes they'll say, oh, we use 50% less energy per chip. Oh yeah, but we're shipping 3 times as many chips as we did 5 years ago. Well, then your total emissions are going up. So it's not an easy problem. I hope I've provided a helpful answer there.
Thank you. How prevalent is the practice of greenwashing in the electronics industry?
I think it's more prevalent in some different consumer goods areas where they're selling stuff directly to the consumer. But to some degree, there is a lot of it, and it can be difficult to figure out. Sometimes it's a matter of just trying to figure which is the least harmful option. And I know it's difficult to work that out. It's very interesting. When I was working on that, figuring out that sustainability award, there were companies that I had thought, oh, they have this great zero waste to landfill program, or here's an example where I have some stories of great things they've done. When I dug deeper, and you can access sustainability reports, you can go to companies' websites if you're willing to dig through. These are 100-page reports, but they have short summaries. You can read the executive summary if you don't want to, wade through a long report. The reporting standards got a lot tougher in 2018. And companies can't just choose to cherry pick which things they report on and ignore those other aspects where they're not doing so well. So if you're willing to spend some time doing the research, you can kind of get behind it a little bit and learn more.
Thank you. Our next question, who are the runners up to ASE?
Well, you know what, we looked very much at Intel, and Intel is actually doing a really good job on a lot of things, but some of it is they have been very vocal about what they're doing. But it was definitely close. And another company that was we were kind of deciding between 3 is ST Micro. And they've also made a lot of strides. They kind of started this whole process a lot later than some of the bigger companies, but it's really encouraging, the changes that they've made just in the last year or 2.
Great, thank you. Our next question, how many have more than one phone and how many are still in use in some way? For example, net radio stream server.
Is it data on like how many phones per capita are circulating around? Is that what we're asking about?
Oh, from the poll.
Oh, what did the poll results say? Oh, okay. The poll results were pretty much here. I can share the result then. Do you see them now? So it's absolutely evenly split, 20%, with the same exact number of respondents for each of the options. So we've got quite the spread here. Maybe again, and the question is, well, how long then did you own the previous one? But there you go.
And the sample size is about 30 people on this webinar.
Yeah.
Julia, are there ways as consumers to have a larger impact that just our personal choices among products or brands?
Okay, personal choices make a difference. And obviously the more people, sharing the message, telling other people who, oh, this is why I'm doing this, and that kind of shares it, but also advocating. There are a lot of organizations that are working towards legislation that will help with kind of forcing companies to save resources, to figure out a way to do it when they're forced. So the pandemic was an example, right? Companies said, oh, we can't do this. We can't let everybody work from home. We can't have telemedicine. Well, you know what? When your hand's forced, you can. Companies can innovate. They can find ways around it, but it's sometimes easier for them to continue the wasteful practices that they've been doing. So if you can get, and my company is a member of the American Sustainable Business Council. That is an organization. Take a look, because you as an individual, you can join there's company memberships, but as just an individual concerned citizen, you can join them for free and get access to their resources. I can put a link in the chat in a bit. They advocate for just all kinds of different responsible business practices. And you can sign petitions, you can get involved in discussions and help move the needle for the electronics industry and lots of different industries.
That's very good to know. And we'll also include these links in the follow-up email, so you'll have all the websites. Julia, our next question, are mixed bin recycling programs working?
Yeah, that. Okay, just a minute. I was pulling up this link. So that is something that I have discussed in other presentations about single stream versus multi-stream recycling. We used to have in Washington and in California, probably in many different places around the country, multi-stream recycling, where you've got a bin for glass, a bin for paper, a bin for plastic, and then went to single stream where everything goes into one bin. There are pluses and minuses of both approaches. The single bin approach is easier for the individual resident, right? You're just like, oh, whatever it is, dump it all in. It's kind of easier for the collection trucks because they can just have one place to dump everything, versus if they got all the 3 different ones, one fills up earlier than another, are they being as efficient? However, when people need to sort stuff at their household, they're much more likely to put the right stuff that actually is recyclable and is going to get recycled in, versus a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't belong. And I've been giving talks to communities all online. It's actually kind of cool nowadays. I reached a community in the Chicago area, and I'm going to talk to another one in Wisconsin. I can talk to people anywhere in the country and tell them about just some of the basic practices that you can put in place to not contaminate the recycling stream with loads of stuff that just isn't recyclable. And so I tell people, the sad story I'm going to tell you, recycle less. You don't, just because they give you this giant blue bin doesn't mean put everything that might happen to be recyclable into it. Don't put your old electronics into it. Those go to separate e-waste, please.
Thank you. The technology in many product areas advances very quickly, and the products don't even function after a period of time. Is anyone designing a product that can be upgraded to current? For example, is Tesla going to offer to swap out batteries, computer modules, sensors, etc.? They constantly upgrade software. Why not hardware?
Yes, there are some signs of that. There are definitely people who are working on technologies for upgrading batteries in electric cars. Now, battery recycling is another huge problem, and that's going to come to a head pretty soon. There's advances being made there. But there's a company called Fairphone, and they make a modular cell phone. But the problem is you have to live in Europe to get one. We cannot get them here in the US. They're just a small bit player, but the idea is you probably, many of you remember, well, I don't know how old all the different alumni here are, but We used to, with our phones, be able to slide the battery off when it wouldn't charge anymore and get a new battery and put it on. Then when they made the phones thinner, right? Again, smaller, faster, cheaper. They made them thinner. Oh, they're great. Carry them around, this computer that does all this stuff, but everything's integrated. And so you can't separate it out. With these Fairphones, it's not like playing with Legos, but it's possible to upgrade. If a particular chip went bad, if a particular module, you can take that out. If you want to upgrade to get more memory, if you need a new battery, you can swap those things out. And I would really like to see more of that kind of thing happening. I don't see the big players like Samsung and Apple doing that yet. I mean, again, the move towards more recycled materials is helpful, but I don't know. But again, I haven't seen those Fairphones because they're in Europe. Maybe they're bulkier.
That'd be great to have it over there. Let's see, what are some of the steps that new or small companies can take to implement more sustainable practices, such as reduce waste, improve supply chain, product packaging design, recognizing that these companies have less money, less people to devote towards sustainability initiatives?
Yes, I just gave a talk on that at Go Green Seattle a couple of weeks ago with a co-presenter, and she consults with small businesses on these issues. The reality is some of these things are not necessarily going to cost you as much as you might think. That yes, small businesses don't have millions of dollars to throw into R&D. There are, though, things that you can do. And some of them are actually going to save you money. And sometimes it's simple. Just changing the default setting on your printers to be double-sided. That can actually make a difference. Or just training the employees, say, you don't need to print everything. With packaging, there are packaging options that involve less waste. And I know companies that are doing it. There are also shipping options, carbon neutral shipping. Again, some of these things might cost a little bit more. The question is, you got to look at the numbers and say, can I afford to do it? Or can I maybe do it piecemeal? There's an example of a small business. They wanted to swap out all their lights for LEDs. And this was a few years ago. LEDs were a little more expensive than they are now. They said, wow, we can't do it all in 1 year. It would cost us $50,000. We don't have that in the budget. They spread it over a number of years to get it done. So there are really a lot of ways. And I would say bring in a consultant to help you kind of figure it out and take a look at what are you doing now? Where are there opportunities for improvement? How much is it going to cost in the short run? You know, or maybe you can make it up later. And sometimes your customers might be able to be willing to spend a little bit more because of the message that comes with that. And you recognize, oh, our materials cost more, but here's why. You might be able to raise your prices. Again, it's an individual case. You got to look at the whole picture. But the other thing that might incent you, if you're in the supply chain of some of these larger companies, you might need to have a certain certification to actually continue to have them want to buy your products.
Thank you, Julia. Looks like we don't have any more questions at this point. If you do, please type in the Q&A. But otherwise, Julia, do you have any last remarks you'd like to tell the audience?
I want to say thank you for being here. I am glad to have the opportunity to discuss this. I'm glad there's a lot of interest around this issue. See what you can do, get involved, learn more, and thank you for the opportunity, Vanessa.
Thank you, Julia, for being our speaker. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and your insights with us. And of course, thank you to our audience for your time and for attending this event. We will follow up within the next week with a recorded video. An announcement for alumni. Alumni April is in full swing. Please visit alumni.hmc.edu and click on the big Alumni April graphic for the schedule of events and registration links. All upcoming events can be found on our online offerings page using the link included in the confirmation email or by visiting alumni.hmc.edu and clicking on online offerings. We welcome any suggestions you may have for upcoming events, or if you are interested in hosting one, please email us at alumni@hmc.edu. Thanks again for joining us and have a great night. And Julia, thank you again.
You're welcome.